There's a yellow rose in Texas I'm going now to see. No other cowboy knows her, nobody, only me.
Well, if you're from Texas, you've never wondered. It's born in you. Do you think you know a lot about our great state? Raise your hands if you think you know a lot about it. Well, you've got a virgin audience here. Would you like to hear a story about Texas you've never heard before? All right, our speaker today is a retired broadcaster of 31 years, so you know he'll have a good voice. He ran the highest rated FM station in America. In addition to being a U.S. Navy veteran, any veterans out there? Navy veteran? All right. He also is a two-term past president of the Writers League of Texas. He is also the proud grandfather of 2 super smart grandchildren. These are his words. He should know. I think he's a little biased. He's the author of the 3-time national award-winning book, Texas in Her Own Words. Is that the book we're looking at today? No. When he is not spending his weekends exploring or writing about all things Texan, he is chasing around after his goofy Norwegian elk hound, Bodie, a.k.a. Dances with Stupid. Please join me in welcoming from Houston, speaker, author, and reformed Yankee, Tweed Scott. And if you want to know how you got that name, ask
It's a real joy to be here, but I got to tell you right up front, I may in fact be here in false pretenses. Because sometime back, Barbara and I were talking about the book, and right in mid-sentence she stopped and she says, "Tell me, Tweed, do you believe in free speech?" Well, silly, of course I believe in free speech. He said, "Great, how about coming up to Highland Springs?"
I didn't say that, but I'm going to use that later.
So, anyway, you don't say no to Barbara, so here I am. Just for fun, I want to see a show of hands. How many transplanted Texans are there in the room? Wow, that's good. That's good. All right, I got to be fair. How many native how many natives are there?
Born in Dallas.
Okay. Now wait a minute. You can only put up one hand. It's all about that double voting thing in Texas, and we're not going there today. Well, I've got to come clean with you. I was not born in Texas.
We're sorry.
Wait a minute. Before somebody yells, "Get a rope," I want to see a show of hands. Who in this room got to choose where you were born? That's what I thought. Well, I didn't get here as quick as I could. I got here as quick as I got sent. You see, I joined the Navy to see the world. Before I even knew what hit me, I was living about 2 miles outside of beautiful downtown Kingsville, wondering who I ticked off. But we'll talk more about that later. Right now, I'd like to tell you the darndest story about Texas that I would just about guarantee that you have never heard before. And every word of it is true. Now, I believe in my heart of hearts that Texas was invented. It was. Texas was invented, and I can prove it to you. And what's more, it all started with some children and a dead man. We'll get to him in a minute. I know virtually everyone in this room knows that Texas was once its own country. It stood on its own 2 feet for almost exactly 10 years. Now keep in mind it was on its feet rather wobbly at times, but it was its own country. And then in 1845, it joined the Union. And for the next 15 years, the winds of the Civil War were blowing across the landscape. And by 1860, the Civil War came about. Texas seceded, joined the Confederacy, fought the Civil War, and 4 years later found itself on the losing side. In fact, it was broke, busted, destitute. It didn't have anything going for it. And on top of that, the Reconstruction era came along, and it really took a toll on Texas. And Texas didn't even get back into the Union for 5 more years. So these were tough times. Now, when Texas did get back into the Union, again, not much was happening here. There was a lot of poverty. People were just trying to survive. They were living day to day, hand to mouth. And like I said, there wasn't much going on, but there was this thing we call the cattle industry. Now, I know we've all heard of that. We've all seen the Westerns and the cowboys and the Indians and the cavalry and the whole 9 yards. It may surprise you to know that that period of time, the peak of the period, the cattle industry and all that, lasted for 14 years. Now, if you think back of all the Westerns you've ever seen, and all the cowboy shows, and you strapped them end to end to end and sat down to watch them, it would take you longer than 14 years to watch them all. All I can say is thank goodness for John Wayne. But at any rate, there was, as I said, there wasn't a lot going on, and we get to the period of time, the turn of the century, around 1900, 1905, 10, in through there. Texas by now is still broke. Nothing is going on other now the oil industry. They find oil down in Spindletop near Beaumont, but it's going to take a while before that actually has an impact. So one day up at the Capitol building, the then governor Campbell and the next governor Oscar Branch Colquitt were sitting around. And they were having this discussion. Saying, Texas has such a lousy image. We're still associated with the old South, the Civil War, the lost cause, slavery, and all the nastiness that went with it. We need no part of that. We need to change our image. And somebody said, well, okay, but what usable history do we even have? And somebody said, well, duh, there was the Texas Revolution. There was the Republic of Texas. Well, yeah, that's something you can build on. But how do you use that information? And that's when they came up with a plan. Now, I won't call it a plan. I'll just say it was an outright scheme. And you're going to see why here in a second. And I bet you agree with me what happened. So they decide, no one's paid any attention. And that's the salient point to get here, is all that period of time from Gonzales, the Alamo, San Jacinto, Washington on Brazos, the Republic of Texas, nobody paid any attention to any of that stuff. That's just stuff that happened back then. And Crockett and Bowie Seguin and Sam Houston and Stephen F. Austin and the rest of it, those just happened to be the guys that were there when this stuff happened. Nobody paid any attention to these guys. Texas history is lost. Nobody paid any attention. And then that's when this plan or scheme came about. What they decided to do was they were going to go out and they were going to revive Texas history. And what they did is they went all over the place, finding people who fought in the Texas Revolution, people who served the Republic of Texas. And they went all over the place to find these bodies, the people who were buried out there all over this state, all over the country actually, and literally exhumed the bodies and moved them to the Texas State Cemetery. But where do you start this? Okay? Enter the dead man. Anybody have any idea who the dead man might be? You can yell at me, I'm used to that. Well, I'll give you a hint. He was the father of Texas. Stephen F. Austin. Not too terribly long ago, I was down in West Columbia. There's a plaque in the ground at this place. You got to know where to find it, and I wouldn't have found it without the help of some locals. There's a plaque in the ground, and it says, Stephen F. Austin died here. And literally, he died in front of the fireplace at his sister's home there. And they moved his body on up to Peach Point by his other sister's plantation, and he's buried in the Gulf Prairie Cemetery. And he remained there. So what this group did is they put together a committee of 3 people. And they went down to the Gulf Prairie Cemetery, and they exhumed Stephen F. Austin. Now, I don't need to be graphic here. The only thing left of Stephen F. Austin, in fact, were his bones. But they did, in fact, determine that these were the remains of Stephen F. Austin. And they wrapped him in a white sheet, placed him in a brand new metal casket, and then they put it on a horse-drawn wagon. And they drove it the 11 or 12 miles to Brazoria, at which point, enter the children. What they did was, see, the plan was to exhume the body and take him to Austin and bury him in a town named after him. And so to do that, they hired a train and they brought the body to Brazoria to meet the train. Well, by the time the body reached Brazoria, they let all the kids out of school. And they gave each of these kids a cut flower and allowed them to walk by the casket in a very simple, dignified ceremony and place the flower on the casket. And they sang the Texas flag song. And then the body made another stop. They brought the body to Angleton, where once again, they let the kids out of school, they gave them all a cut flower, allowed them to walk by, place the flower on the casket, and then again, the train moved on. This time it stopped in Houston. Well, you can imagine, by the time they got to Houston, they brought him to the Stephen F. Austin Elementary School. But by the time he got there, man, all the politicians showed up. There was a lot of speechifying going on, okay? And again, they got the kids involved with the flower ceremony. And this time the kids sang the flag song, but also America the Beautiful. And then from there on, the train took the body to Austin, where they placed him in the Senate chamber for the better part of 2 days for people to come by and pay their respects. And on the last day, October 20th, 1910, they pressed the Austin school children into service. But this time they had a different role. How many of y'all been to the Capitol in Austin? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. When you look at the Capitol, typically you're looking at the south side of it, where you see that big wide promenade that goes all the way down to 11th Street. Visualize, if you will, all these kids dressed up in their Sunday best, lined up down each side of that walkway. And then they brought the Texas flag draped casket down between the rows of children, and then on over to near the corner of 4th and Navasota to the Texas State Cemetery, where he remains to this day. Now, I will tell you, this is the scheme. Having the children involved in anything of some historical significance, that was anything but a coincidence. That was done on purpose. Reason being, you get these kids involved in something like this, who are they going to tell? They're going to tell their kids. They're going to tell their grandkids, and in some cases, their great-grandkids. This is where the resurrection, if you will, of Texas history began. This, to me, is the day that the marketing of Texas began. I mean, let's face it, they've been marketing Texas hardcore ever since the last 4 years or whatever it is. I mean, think about it. When's the last time you saw the Wisconsin version of the Trailblazer? You know, Ford's got, I don't know, 2 or 3 versions of Texas editions, Nissan. In fact, Ford even has a ranch, the King Ranch, has their own truck. You won't find that pretty much anywhere else. Now, we talked about the Texas Cemetery. I have to tell you, the Texas State Cemetery is probably one of my top 3 favorite places, of probably a couple hundred, but probably one of the top 3 places in all of Texas. I love to go out there. I don't know if you've ever been there. If you can, make it a point to go. It's so well done. There's people there. There's a part of it, it's 18 acres, and there's a part of it called Republic Hill. There's more Texas history buried out there in that hill. You can imagine. I can't remember all the governors. Mom, Pop Ferguson are out there. Ann Richards is out there. John Conley's out there. Trying to think who else. Barbara Jordan. All kinds of Texas heroes are out there. In fact, I get tours out there on occasion. I just love the place. And there's my favorite story about the Texas Cemetery. I got a couple I want to share with you real quick. There's a lady buried out there by the name of Joanna Troutman. Anybody have any idea who she is? Joanna Troutman is known as the Betsy Ross of Texas. You see, Governor Colquitt actually asked permission of her family if they could exhume her and bring her to the Texas State Cemetery. You see, what makes that remarkable in my eyes is that Joanna Troutman never drew one breath of air in her lungs in her entire life in Texas. She'd never been here. But what happened was she lived in Georgia. And during the Texas Revolution, the Georgia militia came to help fight the Texas Revolution. And she had a couple of relatives in that group, and along with some friends. And so when they came to Texas, she sent them with a flag. And she is known as the Betsy Ross of Texas. This is the flag. And this flag flew over Goliad. And it also had a Latin inscription on the back that she put that basically says, "Where liberty lives, there is my country." So, pretty remarkable. I thought, here's a lady who's never even set foot in Texas, and she's considered the Texas hero. But it's that kind of place. One of the ladies I interviewed for the book, you've probably heard of, if you know anything at all about American politics. Her name was Liz Carpenter. Liz Carpenter happened to be Lady Bird Johnson's press secretary and chief of staff. And I knew her through the Writers' League to begin with. But I wanted to interview her because this lady's truly pioneer stock. She had one relative who died at the 6th day of the Alamo siege. She had 2 others that fought at San Jacinto. My goodness, if there's anybody more connected to Texas history, I want to meet them. I mean, it's a remarkable woman. I loved her. I mean, she was feisty. I used to joke about, you know, she's the kind of lady that could probably shoot you and not blink as your body hit the floor. You know? Just a great lady. And we were talking about the cemetery, and she said, "You know, Tweed," she said, "there's a lot of heroes buried out there. There's a lot of scoundrels buried out there, too. And a bunch of them are in the same hole." And I thought, well, you know, that says a lot about Texas now, doesn't it? That's us. And one final thing. The Texas State Cemetery was an eyesore. It was, in fact, it was dangerous to even go out there. And at one time we had a lieutenant governor by the name of Bob Bullock. Now, if anybody knows anything about Texas politics, the governor's pretty cool. He gets to go do all the ribbon cuttings and stuff. But the lieutenant governor's the guy who's got the clout. He's the guy who decides what legislation's going to get looked at, what's going to get passed and all that. So he also has some ties to the purse strings. Well, a friend of his died, and the friend was eligible to be buried at the cemetery. So he went to the funeral, and he was appalled at the condition of that place. And at that moment, he took it on as his personal grail that he was going to make that place better. And here's the weird part. That cemetery is 18 acres, and right down the middle of that 18 acres, there's a little road. It's the shortest highway. It's the shortest state highway in Texas, okay? It's called the Kent Highway. And here's the deal. Because it is a highway, he was able to get his hands on about $5.5 million. And he plowed that into renovating that cemetery. And the job they did out there is absolutely phenomenal. It's just, you walk around out there, I find it inspiring personally. But here's the thing. The Lieutenant Governor, Bob Bullock, liked the place so much that when he'd get off work in the afternoons, he'd go jump the fence. You know, they put the key to the place at 5 o'clock. They didn't stop Bob. Bob jumped the fence. And he'd wander around out there for hours amongst the graves and, you know, being inspired. And, you know the stories of a lot of those people. And so it got to the point where the superintendent of the cemetery said, "Look, you're not kidding anybody. Here's the key." They literally gave him a key to the cemetery. Oh, he said, "Just lock up when you go home, okay?" And he did. And in fact, when Bob died, the family turned the key back over to the superintendent. So to me, it's just truly a remarkable place. As we've already established, I was not born in Texas, and I had no idea I'd ever come to Texas. I grew up about 30 miles. I'm about to put a big pin in your balloon. I grew up about 30 miles from where they made that movie on Golden Pond, right smack dab in the middle of New Hampshire. Here's the pin for your balloon. There is no Golden Pond. It was filmed on the shores of 2 lakes, Big Squam and Little Squam. Ironically, I got a call from an old classmate 2 days ago, and she literally was standing knee deep in the water, so big squall. I was like, whoa, it's like full circle. But anyway, that's what I grew up in. Now, keep in mind, I joined the Navy to see the world. I wanted to see the world in the worst way. That's kind of how it worked out, too. But I left for boot camp the morning after high school graduation. Gung-ho, man, I went to boot camp, I went to A school, and they taught me how to pack parachutes. Basically, that's putting 3 pounds of stuff in a 1 pound bag. And then, next thing I know, I'm living 2 or 3 miles outside of beautiful downtown Kingsville, which is 40 miles south of Corpus. Now, I got stationed there, and I had to wonder, why am I being punished? Like, I don't even know that guy's daughter, okay? And besides, if it walked, crawled, or slithered, it would hurt you. And if you try to back up from that, ouch, the plants would bite you. You know, it's like, this is going to take some getting used to. And it did. But the funny part about it is, I grew a real appreciation for Texas right away. There's something about, I'm so brave. I'm barely 18 years old. And I've got a lot of courage. Took me darn near a month to get up the courage to go into town to rub elbows with the locals. And boy, what an education that was. I found early on that you want to get something done, you tell a Texan it can't happen. And then get out of the way, because some action is about to take place. Now, maybe it's not particularly well thought out at that moment, particularly if there's alcohol involved, but something is going to happen. And I just got a real appreciation for that. It's true. It's absolutely true. I can tell you this right now, that the last words of many a Texan has been, here, hold my beer. Watch this. And you never hear from them again. That's just how they are. You gotta love that. As a kid, now this is going to be a bit of a bummer time. As a kid, I was a tap dancer. My mom says I was pretty good. What's mom know? But it started to hurt. And then it turned out that she took me to a doctor, who sent me to another doctor, who sent me to another doctor, and finally by the 4th doctor, my mom's crying. And I'm about 6 years old by now. I don't know what's going on. I got this thing called polio. What do I know? And then, of course, back in those days, that was just about a death sentence, because she wore the braces, and the next thing you know, you're in an iron lung, and then they're saying sayonara to you. I was one of the first kids in my state to get the Salk vaccine, and it caught it. And I'm here today, and very thankfully so. But the doctor told my mom that, understand, be thankful you got your son, because he's never going to be an athlete. He's never going to be able to play with his friends and all that. Well, you know what? When you're that young, does no mean anything to you? Didn't to me. And I went out there and I played with my friends, and I fell down a lot. I got picked last for the baseball teams and the football teams, and probably the cooking shows too. I don't know. But the thing was, I've been told that, sometimes you're just too stupid to know when you're in trouble. But I love it there, because every day is an adventure. I didn't know I couldn't do those things. The great gift that my mom gave me was, my mom never told me I was handicapped. I never bought into that. I didn't know. Yeah, I fell down a lot, and I got up, and I finished last a lot. But I played, I did, whatever. And the reason I tell you that story is because that ties right in with Texans. Texans have got that mindset. It's that can-do. What I learned in the process of researching my book was that Texans are intrinsically how thinkers. If never enters into the equation. There's a way to figure this out, and we'll do it. So, and if you think about it, there was a cattle industry. A couple of guys got together and said, hey, they need cattle somewhere else. Let's just run them up the trail. What's never been done before? So, we're guys. It's what we do. So they went off and they did it. Years later, the oil industry, you know, they were sort of making that up as they went along. And look what happened. When Texas discovered oil, Texas changed the world. Would you believe, it's a fact, the first computer chip was invented in Dallas. So, and look what impact that's had on the world. That's just kind of that Texan mindset. No is simply not an option. There's a way to do this. And that's the great thing about Texans is it goes back to the early days, you know, and they got knocked down, they got up and they dusted themselves off and said, well, heck, that didn't work. Now, how? How do we make this happen? There's a way. And they applied themselves to that. You had to have certain skills to live here, for sure. But by the time I got through researching my book, what happened was, one night at the dinner table, I'm gritching at my son. Dads do that. That is our job. And some of us are really good at it. But I was gritching at my son, and my wife, so out of character for her, just walked up to my son and said, Tyler, do not listen to your father. Wouldn't break it. But she said, understand, you have something that your father will never, ever have. And he said, well, what's that? And she said, you, son, you were born in Texas. That's it. I'm done. That cuts it. These people have got another darn gene. There is a T chromosome, and I'm going to go find it. And that's exactly what I did. That's what that book's all about. I asked some Texan friends of mine 2 questions. I'm not a greedy person. I just wanted the answer to 2 questions. Number 1, what makes Texas special? Why is this place so by golly different than anywhere else on the planet? And number 2, if and when it applied to them, tell me, what's it mean to you personally to be a native Texan? Explain that to me in American so I can understand. And I got some remarkable answers. Now, Texas is big. We all know that. And I knew that I've been around Texas enough to know there's like 5 states within the state. Think about it. You are never going to confuse the piney woods of East Texas with the Chihuahua Desert. Okay? You're not going to confuse the Panhandle with the Gulf Coast. I also knew I couldn't sit on my butt in Austin and write a book about Texas without going to these places. And so I did. I went from El Paso to Nacogdoches, Amarillo to the Valley, and I don't know how many places in between, and I talked to her people. And my criteria is real simple. Blue collar, white collar, natives, transplants, I don't care. All I want is I want to talk to people who walk the talk every day in Texas. That's who I want to talk to. And I found some really remarkable people. But what blew me away was, it wasn't the diversity, because there's plenty of that in Texas, for sure. That's one of her great strengths, is her diversity. But what really blew stuff off my shelf was how people who could live 4, 5, 600 miles apart tell me, essentially, the same thing. How does that happen? What's the glue? These people don't know one another. That's not possible. What ties all this together? So I did a little more digging. And then I figured it out. I'm a guy, and I don't claim to be the brightest bulb in the night drawer. It took me a while to connect the dots. But when I did, I began to see. I come to the conclusion that there's 4 traits or characteristics that all Texans share, regardless of where you live. I don't care if you live in El Paso or El Campo or Amarillo to McAllen or whatever. Texans have these things in common. And tell me if I'm wrong. Number 1, probably the most important, but number 1, without a doubt, is the fact that Texas was once its own country. That is a huge part of a Texan's psychological DNA. That's who you are. And what I also found, and you should be proud of that, really. But what I also found was that if a native Texan doesn't think you know that, go by your own experience if you came from somewhere else. You only had to wait 6 or 8 minutes because they were going to clue you in. You know, that fact's not going to escape you if you live in Texas. And the next two traits are very closely related. Number two is the Texas education system. Texas is one of the few states in the entire union where the state history is so heavily mandated in the public schools. It is the law in Texas. Children will get Texas history in the 4th grade. They're going to get it again in the 7th grade. Some school districts elect to teach it again in the 11th grade as part of American history. You will not graduate from a state college in Texas without taking a course in Texas politics, nor will you be allowed to teach in Texas unless you've taken that course. You see? Now, number 3 is very closely related to that, and that is it comes from within your own families. Think about it. If your families go back 2, 3, 5, 7 generations, it doesn't matter. Somebody, you grew up hearing stories about your great-great-uncle Alphonse or your great-aunt Gretchen. You know, she might run a general store in Bournemouth, and your great-great-uncle might have brought water to Sam Houston's horse 2 months before the battle. Doesn't matter. Somebody in your family helped make Texas, Texas. That's a tremendous point of pride. And you get it reinforced at school, and then you come home with these stories. Kids just grow up knowing that they're part of something special, something bigger than they are. It's not that they're better, although some will tell you they are. They know that they're part of something that's really different and really special. In fact, I joke about it. You know, I think sometimes when these kids come out of the womb, they're branded just like cattle. They've got that T chromosome. You know what I mean? They've got it. So, now, while we're talking about pride, I want to tell you 2 quick stories. When the original book first came out, because we're working on the new edition now. In fact, you're the first audience to get to see it. But when the first book came out, I have a background in broadcasting, and I have a lot of friends, obviously, in the media, and they had their own shows, and I got to do a talk show about a week after the book came out. And I was talking, it was a call-in show, and I was talking with this lady on the phone. She says, I got to tell you something. I said, what is it? She said, I was having a conversation about 3 days ago with my 7-year-old daughter. And I said, you know, I've been in Texas almost 25 years. And that little girl, without missing a beat, looked right up into her mother's eyes and said, well, that may be, Mama, but I've been here all my life. Starts young, doesn't it? I'm telling you, it's real. It's not a put on. It's the real deal. Now, to talk about Texas pride, there's a lady, I don't remember her name, and it's not important, but she was a television anchor in Houston. And she ended up taking out a job in California, I think San Diego. And she was about to have a baby. She couldn't make it back to Texas. You know what she did? She had a Texas-shaped pan full of Texas dirt under that delivery bag. That child was born over Texas soil. I have a picture in my possession. I wished I could have got permission from the father to use it, and I never could. And now I'm one of those people, I put it away for safekeeping, and now I can't find it. But it's a picture of a dad in the delivery room in his little, greeny scrubs and stuff, and he's holding his little boy. And it's obviously a little boy. I think that's why I didn't get to use it. But he's holding his son under the arms, and he's lowering that child into a blue canvas bag. At the bottom of that bag was Texas dirt. The first thing that child's feet touched was dirt, Texas dirt. I mean, that's how it is. I mean, and I've heard lots of iterations of that story, but anyway. And I bet you thought I forgot about trait number 4. Well, every time I mention 4, I see heads go up and down. The 4th trait that all Texans share, without a doubt, is a broken down little mission in San Antonio called the Alamo. Texans revere that place, even if they've never been there. It's the high church of Texas. It's the crucible of Texas liberty. And people appreciate what took place there, the price paid. Texans admire people who stand up for what they believe in, even in the face of insurmountable odds. They know they're probably going to get knocked on their keisters. They don't care. They're going to get up and they're going to go on. That's a Texan mindset. But Texans just really appreciate that place. One of the people in the book is a man by the name of David Stewart. Now, David was a retired Army colonel. In fact, he was one of those guys that every time his wife was about to have a child, she was on a plane or on a train. She's coming home to have those children. And he retired from the Army to take this job. The only reason I interviewed him was, this is the only man in the world with this job. This has got to be a pretty special dude. The guy that the Daughters of the Republic of Texas put in charge of watching over the Alamo. And he was. We turned out to be great friends, fun guy, really dedicated to the work. I just love him to pieces. He's since retired now, but while we were interviewing him, he stopped me and he said, "Do you know? Can you tell me what the two most asked questions are at the Alamo?" "No, I have no clue." He says, "Number one, where's the bathroom?" Okay, I get it. It didn't come with indoor plumbing, okay? By the way, I've done a lot of book signings at the Alamo. It's out back by the Coke machines. And the second most asked question, he says, "Do you know what that would be?" I said, "If I didn't know the first one, I sure wouldn't know the second one." He says, "The second most asked question at the Alamo is, why? Why on earth did they build it downtown?" So obviously, not everybody gets it. David said, because that's where all the hotels were. So, anyway, it's truly a special place. Before I leave today, I just want to say thank you for sharing life's most important and precious commodity with me, and that's your time. Because I know you could be doing other things, and yet you took time out to come by and share with me. And I just humbly thank you. It means a lot to me personally that you would do that. I hope you learned some things and had a few laughs along the way. I just want to thank you again. And I look at you as being just like Texas. You're special. And if you don't think Texas is special, name me another state, any other state, where you can find tortilla chips, ice cubes, sinks, swimming pools, even waffle irons shaped like their state. You can't do it. Don't even try. So anyway, thank you very much again for your time. It's been really good.